Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and this week's guest is Andrea Davis of Better Screen Time. Welcome to the show, Andrea. It's so great to have you.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah, so I have to be honest, I've been just kind of stalking you for years now. I get all your emails. I look at everything that you send over. I think I've downloaded all your freebies. Only thing I haven't done is actually taken your course. Or your
Next
courses.
step.
Next step, I'm on it. And it's something that you're going to talk about today that is near and dear to my heart, which is just screen time and phones and our kids and what's going on with their mental health and how, as parents, we can help them navigate this world of getting a phone, maybe dealing with social media. I have so many questions and I have so many things, but if you could share with our listeners a little bit about your journey from becoming when you were a teacher to becoming this, screen time navigator and founding of Better Screen Time.
Yes. So really this journey started a really long time ago. So my oldest is 18. She's graduating next month. And when she was around two, I had a conversation with a really good friend. At the time, we were at Purdue. My husband was working on his PhD. And I noticed that this friend was just like an amazing reader. She loved to read. She read all the time. And so I asked her one day, I said, Rachel, what did your parents do to instill this love of reading in you? And she said, well, we didn't have a TV growing up. And I was like fascinated. I was baffled. And I really just got curious. And I went home. I told my husband, Tyler, I said, what would you think if we put the TV in the closet? Not necessarily got rid of it, but what if we just put it in the closet and we pulled it out almost like an appliance? So when we want to have family movie night or watch the Olympics, we can pull it out. And my husband's not really into sports. And he's an engineer, so he's very practical. And so he was completely on board. I know this wouldn't fly in a lot of homes, but that's what we did. We put the TV in the closet and we just worked really hard to keep screens from being a major part of our family. So, fast forward, years later, we have 5 kids. We had a big cross-country move from Illinois to Oregon, where we now live. And at that time, our oldest was in 6th grade. And this was the time and that era when really parents were starting to give middle schoolers smartphones. And so I noticed like our friends were getting phones and she was leaving these friends behind. And then we were moving to this place where we didn't know anyone. And I felt like I wanted to be able to just get in touch with her so she knew where to get off the bus. Again, it was more just, I was thinking of this as a tool, really a communication tool. That's it. Well, it didn't take long for us to realize that it was too much too soon. We hadn't prepared her. We hadn't prepared ourselves. Pretty soon there were all these apps on the phone. And I still remember her coming home from school one day and plopping down at the kitchen table with her after school snack of cereal. And she's spooning the cereal into her mouth with one hand. And then she's doing this with the other hand, scrolling and not talking to me. And it was this moment where I realized that this device had really become a wedge in our relationship. And it was preventing us from having that conversation that we used to always have, like, how was your day? How was school? And, and a series of other events after that. So we eventually hit the reset button. We took the smartphone away. We talked to our daughter. We said, we're sorry, we made a mistake. And we went back to a brick phone. So now today, there are a lot of kids' safe phone options available that don't have internet access or have limited apps. That wasn't an option then. Apple Screen Time didn't even exist then. So it really was just like the Wild West of phones in that area. But that was one of the best decisions I ever made. But it was at that point, and I was a stay-at-home mom mostly for years and years. So I taught school, I taught junior high before I stayed home with my kids. And then I stayed home. But it was at that point when I realized, you know what, I'm going to use this teaching degree that I have to teach parents and teach families so that they can not make this mistake that we made and do it better. And that really was how Better Screen Time was born.
Okay. Yes. And so now your daughter is about to graduate high school. And how
Yes.
does when she looks back at that 12-year-old self of, herself, what does she tell you today? Like, how does she feel about what went down then and, how it's changed or helped her, or maybe not helped her in some ways?
I love that you asked that question because
Hmm.
just a couple of months ago, she sent me her college admission essays to read and to edit. So I'm going through all these Google Docs of essays, and I hit this one where it's like, my parents kept our TV in a closet. This is how it starts. And I was like, oh boy, where is this going? And it really does go through this, like, just what she went through of like even being in fourth grade and everybody had watched um Who's Got Talent, or America's Got Talent or whatever the night before, and she was the only one that hadn't watched it and was completely clueless and definitely felt a little bit of isolation. And then she moved into the story of the smartphone being too much too soon and going back to a brick phone, and really like those challenges. But like the last paragraph was just like, I was in tears. So she essentially said, it wasn't fun at the time, it was challenging, but I grew a lot. And she said, what I learned is that while my peers were being fed all these images on TV and social media, and they really are struggling with these body image issues, I was going to ballet class and learning to love my body and learning to love myself. And the last line of the essay just said, she said, I know who I am. And
Wow.
so and I share that so that parents can maybe feel some hope that a lot of times when we put these boundaries in place and restrictions around screens, our kids don't usually love it. And, it's super important to get them involved, to have them be a part of it. And we did that. And, we can talk more about that. And it was something that I learned, but also to realize that a little bit of pushback is normal. And just the key is like keeping that relationship strong. And so I just, through all of those years and all of that time, I tried hard to nurture my relationship with her and also to educate her. So we sat down and we watched TED Talks together. We talked about her values. We talked about like what boundaries feel good to her on devices. And so it wasn't just like, oh, just no screens ever. It was like this process of let's get ready, because now she does have a smartphone and it does still have some restrictions on it. But those are things that we've agreed upon, simply because I've talked to so many parents who have sent their college age kids out without really kind of those training wheels previously and just kind of handed over the phone, and really they've gotten into a lot of trouble too. So it's just, it's a process, and the process will look different for everyone, but
Sure.
she
Sure.
is now grateful.
Oh, that's I mean, I love that. And I can only imagine the pushback. I mean, the parameters that we put on our kids' phones, but there's always pushback. And when, you're 14, 15, you think you know everything and you think
Yes.
that everybody's watching everything that you're doing. And I mean, I remember feeling that way. My ego is just so strong. Um, and, you know, I see a lot of I say young teenagers, and I'm really speaking like 12 to 15 who have free reign on a phone and on social media. And I just worry. I worry about them. And I worry about what they're getting fed and what they're seeing, and then how that imprints on them as they're evolving and developing it, their young brains. Um, so yeah, and I know I briefly mentioned to you before we started talking about Jonathan Haidt. I follow his research and what's coming out, and he's talking about teen mental health issues in the Anglosphere, and his research. He's even taking it further out to different countries now. And they're not necessarily saying it is a causation that the phone causes the mental health issues, but there definitely could be this correlation. And so in what you do and what you teach parents, it's primarily parents that you're teaching, right? You're teaching them how to navigate the whole phone and the screen time. So what are some of the things that you would share when a parent is like, okay, I realize this isn't the best, we didn't make the best decision about giving them the phones. Like, where do you start with them and what do you recommend?
Yes. Well, I always recommend first starting with the relationship. So no matter how screen obsessed your kid or your teenager is, if that relationship isn't in place, then, nothing else really matters. So I think setting our own devices aside as a parent and just saying, hey, let's go get ice cream, or let's go on a bike ride, like just kind of those simple things in life where we step away. And if your teenager is or child is so attached to their device that they're like wanting to bring their device with them on the date, then maybe that's where you start. But I really recommend like just modeling and saying, hey, I'm going to leave my phone home. Why don't you leave your device here too? And we're going to just go enjoy some time in nature. Or I think it's like really finding something that your family values, right?
Mhm.
Or for me, getting outside, just because I know there's so many health benefits, both mentally and physically, that's something I'll invite my kids to do quite often, even if it's just going out and jumping on the trampoline. Obviously, like with our teenagers, that starts to get more challenging because they don't always enjoy those things that once were so fun, like
Right.
jumping on the tramp. But I think even just pulling them into what you're doing, like prepping dinner together and having some conversation, going on a walk, it can be really simple. Sitting down and just playing a card game for a few minutes, that's really important because our kids need to know that we're there for them no matter what. And then it's going to be so much easier to, create those boundaries with them if they know we're on their team. So
Mhm.
that really is the best place to start. And then I next recommend creating a family tech plan. And we, have a quick guide on our website at betterscreentime.com to help people do this. But really, you just want to talk about, where are we going to use screens? What are we going to do on them? How long are we going to use them, and when?
Mhm.
So just like that, where, when, what, how long, and really coming up with some guidelines that even the parents can follow. So like, okay, when will we use screens and when will we not use them? Okay, we're not going to use them at the dinner table.
Right.
So they all go on the charging station while we have dinner, and they're not sitting on the counter. Because it's fascinating. There's even studies that talk about how just the presence of a phone can make someone feel distracted. And then it can make the other person who perhaps doesn't have their device sitting out feel just secondary, like they don't feel like they're the priority, right, to the other person. And so that alone is a really powerful tool in building relationships, having a meal together and a conversation without the device being present. So sitting down all together as a family and deciding those things, we also decided we weren't going to take screens into the bedrooms and bathrooms. And for us, the only exception is that my husband will plug his phone in right before bed. And that's like an emergency phone. And he does use it for an alarm clock. That never will work for me. And I learned that it's too big of a distraction. So I've kept my phone out of my bedroom for 5 years now, and I will never go back unless for some emergency that I have to, just because it really has preserved, I feel like, number one, my rest, like sleep. Number two, relationship. So I'm not scrolling on social media on Instagram at 10 o'clock at night. Instead, I'm talking to my husband. And then, yeah, rejuvenation. Like there's
Mhm.
basically this screen-free sanctuary, this place that you go. So just like thinking about what are these boundaries that we can all kind of commit to, writing it down, putting it on the fridge, and also understanding that it's a living document. It's something that will evolve and change
Mhm.
as technology changes and as your kids grow. And that's okay. That's totally fine. You might try something and it doesn't work and you need to modify. And that's all right. But I think if there's no boundaries, then that's when parents tend to be reactive to what's happening. And it's not really fair to our kids or our teenagers either, because they're just in this constant state of being in trouble all the time because they can't read your mind, and might not they might feel like you said something once but then you let it go another time, and so they're confused too,
Right.
right? And so just like laying it all out just helps everybody, and it creates more unity in the home, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I love those tips. In fact, I was kind of, as you were talking about them, thinking about our kind of our rules in our home. We have some similar rules. I could be better in some areas too. I think at my daughter's high school, they can have their phone on them, but they can't take them out in class. So
Hmm.
she's so used to having it on her. Like it seems like she doesn't always go to it, but it's on her person, like on her body. And I don't know, that
Yeah.
drives me crazy. I'm like, put it away, like put it down, walk away from it.
Hmm.
But I do know that there is that pressure of, well, all my friends have this app. Can I please have this app? And I'm like, no, no, you can't have that app. And it's Instagram. I have Instagram
Yeah,
and I use it for the podcast and for, my business. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's like it's
yes.
a wonderful way to promote what we do and to connect with like-minded people. But at the same time, I can just go down the rabbit hole of looking at dog videos. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are now cat videos? Like, what am I doing? So I understand how addictive it can be. And I also think about, well, if I gave it to her at this age, her brain is just like, it's just gonna just latch onto it. Um, because I will let her look at my Instagram. I'll say, set a timer for 10 minutes. You can look and then give it back.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's not enough for her. She's like, all my friends have it. And I'm like, I don't care what your friends have.
Yeah.
I don't care. And I feel like as a parent, you kind of just get to that point where you have to just know that you just have to say those things, even if their friends have
Hmm.
it. Like, don't give in as parents to that peer pressure of the other parents doing one thing when your kid is begging for something. Do you have any like tips around that or ideas or suggestions?
Yeah, well, I love what you're doing, first of all, and that's something I always recommend to parents. And that was where I started with my oldest was you can use my Instagram, and having those time limits are so important because that tends to be when kids get into trouble or just waste a lot of time, right? When there are no time boundaries.
Mhm.
So, yeah, allowing them to use it in that way and then like baby stepping once they're older, if you feel like they're ready, we have a self-evaluation called Am I Ready? We have one for devices, Am I ready for, you know, a personal device, but we have another one that's Am I ready for social media? And
Mhm.
it's actually a self-evaluation not only for older teenagers, but also for the parent to be like, as a parent, have I done my part to really prepare, my teenager, and are they really ready? So there's a series of questions, but once you get to that point, you feel like, okay, they are much older and maybe they're ready, then you can start with having them put the account on your device. So they have their own account, but it's on your device first, putting those time limits in place. Again, like even Instagram has, built in time limits where you can at least have some parental control. You can connect your accounts. So I always recommend using those and even doubling up. Like if it's an iPhone, using the screen time. If you're doing an Android, using the Google Family Link and those parental controls. But um yeah, just really baby stepping into it and yeah, not being afraid to say no. And if it's something that you think you might allow at some point, then I think it can also be helpful to say not yet. And like we'll work toward that, but it will probably be a few years or it will be
Mhm.
6 months or, and then let's reevaluate. And I think that can be helpful because you are at least acknowledging that there's a possibility that this might be okay and maybe it isn't. And if it's not, then you can just say no. So for example, my daughter, I remember when she was around 15, yeah, really wanted Snapchat, and we downloaded it on my phone first and looked at it together, spent some time, and I basically just said, I just don't have a good feeling about this. I don't want you to get sucked into these conversations and a lot of other things that are on there. And so we didn't. And it was just one of the ones that I just said no to never. And I'm like, once you leave home, you can decide,
Mhm.
if you're going to use that or not. But I now, again, at this point, my daughter is grateful. But was she grateful at the time? No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no. But then later, so And to go back to like you're talking about this research and the different things that we're learning. Just this week there was a new study that came out, and they actually just recently did this survey from January through April 2023, and they surveyed like 28,000 young adults. They were ages 18 to 24, and they were in 41 countries, and they surveyed them to see basically how old were they when they got their first smartphone and how is their mental health now. And time again, they found that the older a person was when they got their smartphone, the better mental health they had as a young adult. And I think just when you hear it from the teens or the young adults themselves, especially when they get to that age, they at least kind of have that perspective of looking back. And this was independent of any childhood trauma or adversity or anything like that. Like they took all that into account. So these were just, let's say, regular situations. And time again, these young adults, if they got their first smartphone when they were older, they had fewer problems with mental health as a young adult. So right there, I think there's just huge benefits to
Right.
waiting.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think I saw that as well. And I don't know, I get the Substack. Do you get his Substack? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Oh
No,
no,
I
yeah.
don't.
Yeah. So Jonathan Haidt has a Substack. I think I forget the name of it, but every time I get one, I'm just like, and I know I saw that email come through, and I briefly read that, and I that just blows my mind. It's like, I mean, I didn't get a smartphone. I'm almost 50, so like smartphones weren't a thing until I was in my what, like early, late, like in my mid 30s. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
So of
Yeah.
course it makes sense because I'm a grown adult with life experiences under me, frame of reference for the world, a worldview. So getting a phone while and getting the apps can be a little bit addicting because it is. The algorithms feed you what you want more
Mm-hmm.
and more of, and so you stay on them longer. It's like I know I have that awareness, like, whoa, I know this isn't good for me. Let me put this down, or let me delete this app, or let me figure out how I'm going to use this so I don't waste my time. um and I mean, I feel as though the past 6 to 8 months I've gotten a lot better personally with using my smartphone because I noticed that it drains my creativity. It
Yeah, me
actually,
too.
yeah. So I feel like I don't have as much content creation. I feel like I'm not able to think about what type of guests I want to bring on. I mean, really, it kind of clouds me and makes me a little foggy.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel as though the less I can be on and the more out in the world I'm doing and talking to people and, being out and having one-on-one conversation, gosh, like that fuels me. And I just think about our teens and our middle schoolers, as much as they don't want to talk to people and they feel awkward and anxious and scared and weird and all those things. The best
Yeah.
thing we can do for them is put them in situations where it challenges them and forces them to find their skills and then be there for them as their parents to help them understand like what just happened. And what did you learn from that experience, or what were you scared of, or what made you excited? I mean, just having those conversations with them, gosh, about everything is just so important. And oh, just whew, like I could just get on a soapbox about that, Andrea.
Yes.
So
No, it's so true. Yeah, no, I found the same thing in my work, and it's so challenging,
mhm,
trying to run a platform as a business owner in sharing this message and not getting distracted or letting it get diluted by just so much. There's
right.
just so much information out there.
Yeah, and that kind of brings another question to mind. Is you have 5 kids, you said,
Yes.
and your oldest is 18. How old is your youngest?
She will be 9 next week.
Okay,
So
and you have a
she's eight,
business.
18 to 8.
Oh, okay, yeah, and you're married, and
Yes.
you have a business, and
Mm-hmm.
you're a full-time mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you manage it all? How do you, I mean, that's probably a whole other podcast, but like, how do you have this business and then be fully present as a mom? Like, how do you divide your time and schedule your days?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's always a work in progress, but I think putting those big rocks in place first, like Stephen Covey taught in the 7 habits, right? Is like, what are those big rocks and what are the things that we really need to do? All my kids are in school, so I really have to just capitalize on that time from the last crew leaves at 8:30 a.m. and my youngest gets home at around 2:30.
Mhm.
So it's a pretty short work day. And I really just have to, take a very short lunch, and I have to maximize that time during the day. I also have to say no to a lot of things, which is never fun. I don't like saying no to people, but I have found that I don't have time to create content and do those things that are really kind of the pillars of my business if I say yes to everything. So I have to be pretty mindful of that.
Right.
And then I try really hard to shut my laptop at basically 2:40 once my youngest comes home. And then we're basically usually getting into the chaos of the afternoon, like running people places. And then there are times when once I kind of get everybody in bed and settled, I might have to return to my work for an hour or an hour and a half before I get ready for bed. But I try to only maybe do that a couple of times a week, because now that I have teenagers, the time when they usually want to have a conversation is around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And so those days of like putting little kids to bed and then having all this work time they're done. And we also live in a really small house. So, I'm sitting here in my office. Our kitchen is just right there through these, French glass doors. And so it's just like everybody's right here.
Yes.
So I do
Yeah.
have some noise canceling headphones, and I do use those. And so I think just being very clear with people, like, especially when it's a season when I'm a little busier, like if, we are launching a course or something like that, I try to be very just communicate a lot with everybody and let them know, like, this isn't our life schedule for always, but for this week, I really have to put a little bit more time into my business. And then there's other times, like a couple weeks ago, I did a social media sabbatical actually. And so I stepped away for screen free week. I stepped away from social media for a week. And I try to kind of prepare my followers for that too. And I just say, you're welcome to join me, even if it's only for a day or two. And then I tell them, like, this is what I'm going to do during that week. And one of the things I did is I took my younger two to the zoo. I actually took them out of school and we went to the zoo for the day, and it totally like rained the whole day, but that was the day that I had. And so we came home super wet, but we still had fun.
Oh,
And so I think it is just like, you're never going to ace it all every
right.
day, but I think like listening to that inner voice of like, okay, I need to put in a little bit more time with my family right now, and with this particular child or with my spouse. And then like my husband and I have a date night every Saturday night, and that's just like, that always happens. So I think, again, if you pick those big rocks too in your family life that are like, we always do this. And I always step away from work on Sunday. And that's like a day for worship and for family time for us. And I never get on social media on Sunday either. So I think just like I have those boundaries, so then I'm not like feeling like I'm toggling back and forth between the
Yeah.
two. And that helps.
Yeah, yeah. I like how you have it, like you said, the big rocks. You know what needs to happen for your business, and you know the things that spur your business forward, and you have good boundaries, saying no to things that and I totally understand that. And I can relate to a lot of what you're sharing. It's a good it's a good reminder of because I know a lot of my listeners are moms, and they maybe they own their own practice or they own a group practice, and it's tough. We want to be there for our clients, but we also have children and a husband, and how do we set those boundaries up and stay true to what we want to accomplish, but yet also be the best that we can be for our families. So
Totally.
that's great. I love that. So tell us a little bit about the different options you have for people to learn more about better screen time. So you have some course. I'll let you just share. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, no. So obviously you can go to our website, betterscreentime.com. We have a lot of just like free downloads there, like screen free activities or um, just a lot of different tools and resources you can use based on what you need. And then we have a quick guide there that I mentioned earlier that can help you create that family tech plan. That's one step I recommend to everyone. And then we have two online courses. So one is called Creating a Tech Healthy Family. That's really for parents with kids ages like 5 to 13. You can obviously do this with teenagers too, but it's basically that foundation. And then our other course is called Untangling Teens in Tech. And that's primarily for parents with preteens and teens, whether you're like helping them prepare for, a basic phone, or for internet access, or any of those things. It's really like, instead of that whole family approach, it's a one-on-one approach. And I did that with my oldest, and I'm currently doing it with my 15-year-old right now. And so those are both, great options if people want to dive in a little more. And then we are ironically on Instagram and Facebook. It has better screen time.
I get it. I'm on there too. It's like you have to be there as much as we
Yeah.
don't want to. I totally feel it. I'm gonna implement some of your sabbatical things, because what I find is when I take a couple days, like a day off, I don't want to get back on. I have to like
Yeah.
make myself get back on.
Yep.
Like, oh, you haven't posted in 6 days. Like you have to get back on there. And
You're
so
not alone.
yeah, it's fascinating how it's like a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, who knew 15 years ago we'd be having this conversation about this free thing that's out there that helps us like grow our businesses and our brand, but also can really wedge this weird thing into our day to day. And
Totally.
I
Yeah.
love what you're
No, it's so
doing,
true.
and I really feel like what you're doing is needed and so important. I hope that our listeners will go and check out your website and download your freebies and get on your email list, because you really do share some great resources. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we end?
Yeah, well, we're happy to give a discount for your
Oh,
listeners, so they could get 20% off either of our courses. I
oh,
believe
great. That's great.
Lisa, if we're going to
Yes.
use the code Lisa to get 20% off. And I'll let you know I'll let
Yeah.
you let everybody know how long that will be available for. I really think my last recommendation would just be to just start small.
Mhm.
So whether that's putting the devices away at dinner time, or sitting down and creating a family tech plan, or getting your own phone out of the bedroom, or maybe taking a social media sabbatical for even a couple of days. I think it's just like, listen to your intuition. Like, what's that thing that could really help your family, help you become a tech healthy family, right?
Right.
That's where I would start.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. And I hope everybody heads over and grabs your great stuff. So thanks again, Andrea. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.